Obviously, a lot of us are in, various moods following the election results last night, and we're going to probably have some discussion of that. But to me, it's summed up in a quote from one of the heroic doctors from Gaza, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta. He says, "Gone is the genocidal president, too hypocritical to admit it, and in comes a genocidal president who wears it as a badge of honor." So I think that sort of sums it up pretty much. Uh, the Israeli far right is ecstatic about Trump getting elected, although how much worse he can do than Biden or Harris is an open question. But they certainly prefer him, and they're high-fiving each other on Twitter in Israel. And Trump, made gestures to the Muslim and Arab community, whether insincere or not, that Harris and the Democrats were totally unwilling to do. Quite the opposite. They gave the back of their hand to the concerns of Arab and Muslim voters. And, the result was in Michigan that many of them supported him. And in Dearborn, which is kind of like the focus of an Arab majority community, Trump won, and Harris came far behind, and Jill Stein got a very substantial vote in that community. And I think that recognized, I don't know if it was a political, so much a political vote as an effort to punish who they perceived as the people who were actually carrying out the genocide, as opposed to the one Trump who was supporting it. And by the way, you'll all be hearing, presumably from the Democratic apparatchiks, that Jill Stein and the other third-party people, were responsible for Trump. And the reality is, as far as I'm aware, there's no state in which Jill Stein's vote was equal or more than the margin that Trump won by. So that narrative is a fake. And I've seen that from all the battleground states, that Trump won by a much wider margin than the votes that Jill Stein got. And Trump, by the way, and especially in the latter part of the campaign, was making noises as a peace candidate, especially to the Arab community. And of course, we're skeptical of that, but I think it was politically effective. And the New York Times reported that among the voters who remained undecided, peace and the issue of Gaza was uppermost in them. And Trump appealed to those voters and got some of them, or discouraged others from turning out for Harris. So I guess the summing up is that I saw a graphic on Twitter earlier today from an anti-Zionist, very religious Jewish group that showed the electoral map with Trump raising his hands in victory, having won all the 50 states, basically, that Israel was the only clear and unanimous victor. So I'll leave it at that for the time being. And by the way, I mentioned before that Neil's opponent, the independent Nadia Milleron, I think is her name, got 37% of the vote with a campaign that was barely visible. And we can only imagine, if we had been able to mobilize for her or for other opposition candidates to the worst on our delegation, that there's some prospect of success there, I think. So getting back to the Middle East, you probably all saw that yesterday on election day, Netanyahu fired his defense secretary, Yoav Gallant, who is anything but a dove. He was the one, remember, quoted immediately after October 7th, saying that they were fighting human animals in Gaza and they should not receive any food, water, medical supplies, or fuel. But Gallant, like much of the military establishment in Israel, has close ties with the Pentagon and the U.S. military establishment, and in his case, also with the Biden administration. And so this was a preemptive strike by Netanyahu to sort of cut off any potential influence within his government from Biden and the U.S. Pentagon, Biden and Austin. And I remind you, for whatever it's worth, that remember the letter that Austin and Blinken wrote giving Israel 30 days to get its act together and allow more aid to Gaza. By my calculation, the 30 days are up on November 15th. And I don't have any high expectation that they'll hold Israel to account, but it's something we should pay attention to. In other words, this was, because Israel is doing the opposite of allowing more humanitarian supplies into Gaza. In fact, the number of truckloads is as an all-time low right now, and almost nothing is going into northern Gaza, where Israel now claims they've divided northern Gaza into 3 parts, and the northernmost part has been effectively depopulated, which has been their aim, to depopulate that, and who knows, and turn it into a free fire zone. So that is ongoing. That's the general's plan, which the general that has put it forth is one of the liberals, supposed liberals in Israel. And of course, as we're seeing in the videos that are coming out of Gaza and southern Lebanon, that people are proud of the atrocities they are committing, especially the soldiers. And to my mind, it illustrates the fact that Israel, in its majority, is a profoundly depraved society. Even the Nazis were at pain to hide their atrocities when they could, and Israel's soldiers are bragging about it. In Lebanon, they are carrying out a sort of scorched earth policy within a band several kilometers deep near the border. They have blown up most of the towns and villages in that area, destroyed most of the housing. Clearly, their plan is not to allow the civilians to return to the border villages in Lebanon and make that a free fire zone permanently. There was a UN letter, which I circulated, demanding an arms embargo against Israel that was signed by 50 plus countries, notably including nominally some American allies in the Middle East: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and of course, Algeria, Turkey, and a whole number of countries in Latin America: Mexico, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and China. So this was a very powerful illustration of where world opinion is trending and how isolated the U.S. and Israel are at the UN. And finally, we're going to hear more about it, given, as we know, that opinion polls show that a majority of Democrats and a majority across the board favor a less pro-Israel policy, including limiting arms that go to Israel. Repression is the way that the governments in the U.S. and Europe are addressing that, and that's that will only ramp up potentially under a Trump presidency. So we need to have strategies for dealing with that. And Susan is going to talk about a court case in Texas that is challenging the repressive use of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. So that's all I have. We could go on and on, but
thanks, Jeff. We can take a few comments and questions to Jeff before we go into our breakouts. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out who's got the hand up. Wait a minute. Noble, go ahead.
Jeff, you mentioned the behavior of the Israeli army, and I think it's Norman Finkelstein has pointed out that the army has universal participation. Everybody has to serve in it, and so it's really indicative of the whole society. I mean, kind of in a way, it reflects it.
Yeah, I certainly agree, and even the small fringe of leftists that are, actually support Palestinian rights in Israel also recognize that there is no hope for reform within Israeli society, Jewish society itself. And they are calling very bravely for sanctions to be placed on the Israeli government, even though it puts them very much in danger. I suspect a lot of the signatories of it are living outside of Israel. But still, it's a very brave gesture to say that the only way Israel can change is by sanctions and pressure from outside. There's no substantial constituency inside Israel that is in favor of a different path.
Great. Paul.
Yeah, just in terms of the election, I'm wondering whether with some Democrats, certainly the strong pro-Israeli stance by the Biden administration is partially connected to wanting to win votes from Zionists. No,
it's money and sort of inertia, ideological inertia. Look, the Jewish vote in the United States has been overwhelmingly Democratic since forever, including in this election. And the idea that somehow it was an electoral strategy to get Jewish votes is just false. There is a lot of money from Jews and others that are important pressure points for maintaining a pro-Israel policy, especially as the elections are costing more and more and more billions of dollars. But the Jewish vote is not what it's about. In my opinion.
So the Jewish vote still went strongly for the Democrats?
Yes. Yes. There was an article that I saw today that estimated something between 2/3 and 3/4 of the Jews in the United States voted for the Democrats. I can't find the exact figure, and that has been pretty constant for many electoral cycles and hasn't changed. There is the minority among Jews, the Orthodox and nationalist, Zionist Jews have been trending Republican, but they're a small minority of the Jewish community as a whole.
And let's go to Zarina.
All right, so I have a couple things. One is there are a lot of signs in Arabic and so forth that Trump used in Michigan, so he really played into the culture there, whereas Harris just came with, what's her name, Cheney, and had these lectures, and so it was very distant, and he was really interactive. Second is I went to this thing last night with the Warren Party, and I forgot to mention at the beginning, when I got there early, there was a woman that was dressed in a Sikh outfit, but so I was talking to her a little bit, and she told me she was Jewish, and she goes, I'm afraid that, and I told her, I don't like the views of Warren's carrying and so forth, and she goes, well, I'm worried about Israel being disappearing. People want to break it apart. I'm like, that's their doing. We're not doing that. I said, we're just trying to get the people in Palestine to be recognized and to be safe. So I think there's a lot of misconception out there with some people, and I'm not saying the Jewish, because there's a JVP has been very active, but the Christian Zionists and so forth. So 2 thoughts on that.
Okay, Susan.
I just wanted to say that open letter that Jeff referred to by Israeli citizens living here and in Israel. The signatories are, last time I checked, it's now up to 3,400, and they are calling for every possible sanction against Israel, including cutting off arms supplies, to save Israel from itself. That's the way they put it.
Great.
I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Pat.
As long as we're talking about the election, I just wanted to mention that I was shocked a couple of days ago when a Muslim friend of mine said she was trying to figure out, from New Hampshire, she's trying to figure out if she wanted to vote for Stein or Trump. And she sent me a speech by an imam that talked about how evil Harris and Walz are, and that it's important to vote for Stein or Trump. And then her husband called me yesterday afternoon, just railing about how terrible Harris and Walt's were, and that it was so important to vote for Trump. Trump is the man. Trump has his own mind, and he is who will be best for the Palestinians, which I just found absolutely shocking. But I think it was Jeff who sent around an email today about how so many Muslims went for Trump. And I think that part of it is that they just ran a really smart, dishonest campaign. And was able to talk a lot of people into thinking that this was who was in their best interest. Or maybe he's right and I'm wrong, but I just wanted to add that.
Okay, I'm going to call on Paul and then we'll move on to the breakouts. Paul?
Yeah, just quickly, Jeff, in terms of the breakdown of the Muslim vote in Michigan, how good figures do we have on those? Did you say that most Muslims in Dearborn voted for Trump?
A majority, a plurality rather. Trump got something like 40-something% of the vote. Harris got less than 30%, and Jill Stein got about 20%.
And is that
and by the way, those same cities had voted for Biden in 2020 by a substantial margin.
right?
So there's no questioning about what was motivating them to change their vote. It certainly is Gaza and Lebanon.
Yeah.
And by the way, I did find the article, according to the Times of Israel, which cited opinion polls, exit polls, 79% of U.S. Jews voted for Harris.
Great,
Oh.
thank you.
Karishma? Well,
Just a quick comment. So I'm a Muslim and I did vote for Harris. But just there's a bunch of us who are pro-peace and we all struggled, and we represent Jewish, Christian, Muslim, atheist faiths. So I know that because we are talking about Israel-Palestine, we will talk a little bit more about maybe the faith-based groups. But honestly, this was a mandate. He won across the country, everyone, regardless of age, education, gender, race, immigration status, whether they were born here or not. He won. He was able to mobilize so many people. So the Muslim population is still so small. I would not necessarily blame them or blame, yeah.
No,
I would not.
absurd.
So just to clarify my comment, I was